went into terror because I thought I was going to lose everything. Those dreams as a child, which now were...
The Spice Girls sold the world on girl power, 5 friends, 1 unstoppable message, 0 drama between them. Mel C just blew that image wide open, admitting to something that happened decades ago and nearly cost her a spot in the biggest girl group on the planet. Mel C revealed she hurled a few choice words at fellow Spice Girls member Victoria Beckham after the 1996 BRIT Awards, an incident she says nearly cost her a place in the band entirely. So what actually happened that night, and how does a fight backstage almost end one of the most successful pop group careers in music history? The timing matters here more than almost anything else in this story. The 1996 BRIT Awards landed right as the Spice Girls were exploding into global superstardom, the exact moment when 5 young women went from unknown to inescapable practically overnight. That kind of sudden, overwhelming fame creates enormous pressure fast, the sort of pressure that can turn small tensions into major blow-ups almost instantly, especially among people who are suddenly living in each other's pockets around the clock. Here's the part that really pulls you in. What could possibly have caused a fight serious enough to threaten someone's spot in the group? Mel C has not laid out every single detail of what triggered the confrontation, but her own description of the moment, hurling words at Beckham specifically, suggests something sharp and direct rather than a slow simmering disagreement. Bands operating at this level of sudden fame often deal with exactly this kind of flashpoint, tension building under the surface for weeks before erupting all at once in a single charged moment that nobody planned and nobody could fully walk back afterward. The fact that this incident nearly cost Mel C her place in the group says something important about how fragile even the most successful, most beloved acts can be behind the scenes. From the outside, the Spice Girls looked unstoppable, a perfectly packaged phenomenon riding an unbroken wave of hits and headlines. Internally, according to Mel C's own account, the group was navigating real, serious conflict, serious enough that someone's continued membership was genuinely in question, all while continuing to perform the exact brand of unified girl power the public was buying into completely. So why is Mel C choosing to reveal this now, decades after it happened? Public figures revisiting old conflicts long after the fact tends to follow a familiar pattern. Enough time has passed that the story can be told without reopening a genuinely painful wound, and enough curiosity still exists from fans who only ever saw the polished, public version of the group. Mel C sharing this detail now offers something rare, a real, human account of what it actually felt like behind one of pop culture's most tightly controlled images, at a moment when nobody involved could have predicted how enormous and enduring the Spice Girls' legacy would eventually become. This revelation also adds important context to how fans understand the group's later years and eventual dynamics. Bands that survive genuine internal conflict this early in their career often carry the residue of it for years afterward, shaping how members interact, tour, and eventually navigate reunions long after the original tension has technically been resolved. Understanding that a fight this serious happened at the absolute height of their initial fame reframes some of what fans may have quietly sensed in later interviews and appearances without ever having the full story to explain it. Fans who followed every reunion tour, every interview, every carefully worded comment about the group's dynamic over the decades now have a genuine data point to explain some of the more guarded moments that never quite got a full explanation at the time. A tense pause in an old interview, a joke that landed a little too pointed, details that seemed minor in the moment suddenly read differently once you know a fight this serious happened just as the group's fame was taking off. There's a simple reason stories like this get told now instead of back when they happened. In 1996, admitting to a real fight would have handed tabloids a "Spice Girls are falling apart" headline overnight, at the exact moment their whole career depended on looking unified. 30 years later, that risk is gone. The group's legacy is already locked in. Nobody's going to read this and decide the Spice Girls were secretly a failure. So Mel C can finally tell it as what it actually was, 2 young women under insane pressure, having a bad night, instead of a career-ending scandal. It's also worth pointing out how normal this actually is for bands, even though it rarely gets said out loud. 5 people, thrown into nonstop touring, press, and global attention within months, with zero prior experience handling any of it. Almost every group that hits that level of fame that fast has a version of this story. Most just never admit it, because the incentive has always been to protect the "we're basically sisters" narrative that sells merchandise and reunion tickets. That's what makes Mel C's timing smart rather than reckless. She's not undercutting the Spice Girls image, she's updating it. The old version required pretending nothing bad ever happened. The new version says something bad happened, they worked through it, and they're still here 3 decades later. That's a stronger story than the fake one, and it's harder to argue with, because it's not selling anything. She's not promoting an album or a tour. She's just telling people what actually happened, which is a very different thing from a group spinning a narrative for press. If anything, this is the version of the story that ages well. The polished one gets boring. The real one gets talked about. Victoria Beckham has built one of the most recognizable personal brands in the world since the Spice Girls, moving through fashion design and a high-profile marriage with a level of poise that rarely cracks in public. Mel C's revelation offers a rare glimpse of a much younger, much rawer version of that same relationship, 2 women navigating instant fame together, occasionally colliding under pressure neither of them had any real experience handling at the time. For longtime Spice Girls fans, revelations like this one tend to deepen rather than damage the group's legacy. Learning that the girl power message was built by real people navigating real conflict, rather than 5 friends who simply never disagreed, makes the group's eventual staying power feel more genuine, not less. Perfect harmony makes for a nice headline. Real friction, worked through and survived, makes for a story people actually connect with decades later. That distinction matters for how an entire generation of fans processes their own memories of the group. Girl power was never really about pretending conflict does not exist. It was about 5 people staying a unit despite the pressure, despite the fame, despite moments exactly like this one. Knowing the real story behind that resilience arguably makes the message land harder now than it did the first time around, precisely because it turns out to have been earned rather than simply performed for cameras. Whether Mel C and Beckham ever discussed this specific moment privately in the years since, or whether it simply became one of those stories that gets easier to tell the further away it gets, this revelation adds a genuinely human layer to a group most fans only ever experienced through carefully managed public appearances and chart-topping hits. Drop a comment on which Spice Girl you think you'd have gotten along with best, subscribe for more throwback celebrity reveals like this one, and share this with anyone who grew up singing along to every single one of their songs.